I've been extremely busy the last couple of weeks or so. Between work, spider webs, don't feel like walking through those. But between work, lifting weights, had to do a lot of research about the years of lead in Italy for a stream that me and a friend are going to do here soon. But I've also been asked to write an article for a friend's publication. I really enjoy writing. It's something I really never do anymore. Honestly, I feel like I can write much better than I can speak, to tell you the truth, you know. I've got a pretty thick accent. I probably sound like a dumb hick to some people, but I can write a lot better than I can speak. I know back during college, some people that I was in a group with in one of my final classes were impressed at how well that I could write, given how bad of a public speaker and how I just had a general disdain and disregard for my classes and schoolwork. But this video, it's just going to be kind of like a verbal brainstorming regarding that article. It's also going to serve, I guess, as a primer to a video that I plan on making here in the near future regarding as to what I see as possibly one of the fatal flaws of American white nationalism, I guess you could say. But this article, and what this video is about, is a question that I've been turning around and examining in my mind, I don't know, for a while now. But I'm just putting my thoughts out there finally. And the question is, what is it to be a man? But it also leads, of course, to the question of, what is it to live? Before I get started, yes, I know I do look different. Well, Miranda cut all my hair off for me. I think she did a good job. It was just a decision of practicality, you could say. Got tired of having to tie it up all the time. Tired of sweating, which doesn't eliminate that, but still. Plus, if things ever came to push and shove, long hair, I would imagine, could be a liability in such a situation. But what is it to be a man? If you've ever watched the show Breaking Bad, and I know it's degenerate Hollywood stuff, but I enjoyed it, and you know, I think it does a decent job of actually capturing how the criminal world is, although it's sort of fantastic, and I also think it glosses over a few things, but I guess I'm just nitpicking here. But if you have seen that show, you will know of Gustavo Fring, the owner of Los Pollos Hermanos, and the Southwestern drug kingpin. And there's a particular scene that stands out to me when I first seen the show many years ago, is when Walter is shown by Gustavo the clandestine meth lab that he has spent untold sums of money to create under his industrial laundry. And Walter is leaning towards not cooking anymore because it had cost him his family. But Gus, in order to persuade Walter, said something that I thought was a very good line. Walter is lamenting that he had lost, this had cost his double life, had cost him his family. But Gus asks him if he has children, and Walt replies yes. And Gus replies saying that as long as you have children, you have family. And what does a man do, Walter? And Walter hesitates. And Gus, in an ominous tone, replies that a man provides for his family. And he does it. Whether or not he's even loved or respected, he simply bears up and he does it. Very good line, I thought. And it worked too. Because if you've watched the show, you know what happens next. But this is just one aspect, I believe, of being a man. To provide for yourself and your family. It has been this way since the beginning of recorded history. And even before recorded history. I think of, the Cro-Magnon or the Neanderthal hunting for woolly mammoths and mastodons and providing the way for their children and women to survive. But this is only one aspect of what it is, I believe, to be a man. Years ago, back during what I call the years of meth that I went through, I had an older guy that was a friend. And this conversation came up one time. We were hanging out at his place, and he said that he thinks to be a man, a huge part of it is having children. And I believe that he is true, that he is correct in that. But of course there is also exceptions. I don't have any children yet. And if it never comes to pass that I do, I can't help it. I will view my life as a failure in a way. Natalism is very important. But like I said, there are exceptions to this. There are several great men in history who never had children. But these great men, what I believe is, if you don't have children as a man, you have to work much harder in order to leave your mark on this world. Since you do not have children, you will not be leaving behind a legacy. Well, I think I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go up on the porch, and I'll have more to say about this. So what is it to live? My explanation for that, my opinion, is pretty simple actually. To live, I believe, is to experience, to do things. And then it is also to leave a legacy of sorts, you could say. And when I say experience, I wouldn't doubt that there's a lot of people here in modernity who upon their deathbed have a lot of regret. They have a lot of, they feel like perhaps that maybe they never lived. And that's a tragic thing, I think, to be honest. I'm approaching middle age. If I was to, well, perhaps I'm past middle age because 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were dead before the age of 60. And the one that lived the longest, she only made it to 65. And if that's the case, well, I am well past middle age, I guess. But if I was to kick the bucket tomorrow, one thing I could say is that I have lived, because I've experienced many different things. And I think this is important, Living is not comfort and convenience. It is the very antithesis, I believe, of living. If everything is easy, if everything is controlled, you're not living. You know, I've said before, used to be a drug addict, used to be a criminal, was into thieving, robbery. Life was really exciting back then, you know, and I experienced a lot of things. I've been in and out, I was in and out of jail. I never made it to prison, which is a small miracle in itself, but if I hadn't have quit when I did, nearly 4 years ago, if I hadn't have gotten myself out of that life, I am absolutely convinced that I would be in prison today, or dead, one of the two. Those were the two certainties that, even back then, you know, I knew that I was expecting it, you know. Luckily for me, I was able to extricate myself from such a situation. But during this time, you know, I did a lot of bad things. I wasn't a good person, wasn't a good man. And sometimes, I would be lying sometimes that if I was to say, you know, I had no regrets. There is some pangs of regret, I guess you could say. But I don't dwell on such things. You know, the pangs of regret comes from thinking about all the years, you know, I've wasted most of my decade of my life chasing a high and doing those things. Basically my entire 20s, you could say. Well, I think of, you know, the time that was lost, you know. Sometimes I think about what could have been if I hadn't went down that path that I had chosen. But in reality, it's really pointless to think of such things. That was the path I chose, and I dealt with the consequences. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything, though, to be honest. Because I learned a lot of things during that time. I learned a lot about human nature. I learned how to read people. I learned how to operate in that world. You know, it's not something to brag about in the least, because I wasn't raised to do such things. I have a good family, good parents. You know, I never tried a drug in my life until I was 19, when I went off to college. I'd gotten drunk a few times in high school with some of my buddies, played football with and stuff, go on a camping trip, but you know, never tried a drug of any sort until I was 19. But you know, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, because like I said, I learned a lot of things. And you know, it's not something to brag about, but I was good at robbery and thieving, you know. It's not something to brag about. I also learned too that I was good at operating under pressure. You know, I don't consider myself some high IQ or someone that is particularly brilliant or anything. But I did learn during those times that I was good at improvising and operating under pressure. I was good at thinking on my feet. I was very observant. I wouldn't trade it though. You know, I learned a lot from it. And that was the path I chose. I wouldn't change it. I can't change it. There's no sense on dwelling on things like that. You know, experience doing things, that is an important thing, you know. Very important. And you know, unfortunately, I think a lot of young men, and by extension young women, will find themselves in such a situation. You know, the criminal underworld, the drugs and such, that was the Wild West, you could say. And I do not advise anyone to go down such a path, because it consumes so many people. It's so destructive. You know, modernity, we don't have some sort of great wilderness it seems to conquer, unfortunately. Manifest Destiny was over well before a century before I was born. So I think a lot of people looking for excitement and experience, tales to tell, they find themselves in a situation similar that I was in, and however, it claims a lot of lives, ruins a lot of lives, breaks a lot of hearts, all these things. I'm extremely lucky. But I would warn against, going around and trying to experience, what would I call it? Vapid experience collecting is what I would call it. I know that's a cumbersome term, I guess you could say. But I see people posting pictures on social media, normies, I guess you could say, of their expensive vacation they took to Thailand or Bali or Cabo or where the fuck ever. I've never really traveled much, although I think it's an important thing to do. I've never been out of the southern United States before. Honestly, I hate to leave the mountains, to tell you the truth. I think it's important to travel, but I acknowledge that as I approach middle age, my time for traveling, that window is shut. I have no aspirations to travel. I've always wanted to go to Europe. I've always wanted to go to Norway, Denmark, Scotland, England. I've always wanted to see the Sachsenheim in Verdun, Germany. I've also wanted to see the Balkans. But I understand that time is pretty well closed, and I'm not getting some sort of medical procedure in order to do so. But I think it's important, But if I was to go to these places, I wouldn't want to go see Oslo or Copenhagen or Glasgow or London. Absolutely not. I would want to see the countryside. But like I said, that window's shutting. And you could say that going around and doing drugs is definitely a form of vapid experience collection. But I learned things from it. And I learned skills that perhaps I could apply at some point later in life, if the need ever arises. But the second part of living, jet flying over. The second part of living is leaving a legacy behind, leaving your mark upon the world. Now this is a part where I'm lacking, I believe. The easiest way, I believe, to leave a legacy is through natalism, through having a family, having children. I have no children yet, although me and the lady are trying. Hopefully here soon. I certainly hope so. I definitely do, because I can't help it, I feel that if I was, for whatever reason, if I was never to procreate, have a child, or preferably children of my own, in old age, I can't help it, I will kind of view my life as a failure, because I failed to complete what I would consider our biological imperative. It's our biological imperative to procreate, to extend our lineage. This is the surefire way to leave a legacy. And it's like I mentioned earlier, that old man that I used to run around with saying that, to be a man is to have children. He is correct, I believe. But there's also great men in history who never had children. Several of them. Although I think if you fail to have children, it is much more difficult to leave a legacy, I guess you could say. You have to think outside of the box. Natalism is the most important thing that any of us can do. Having a family and having children. We are staring down the barrel of ethnic displacement. Having a child is more important than anything I could ever fucking do talking to this fucking camera. Much more important. And that's why I admire people like, well, Apollonian Germ. Congratulations on your son, your healthy son that was born here last week. Didymus Sumi did. Congratulations on your children. People I know in real life. Boris Gall, you're expecting another child. It's excellent. Swamp Bro, your children are almost grown. Anybody watching this that's had children and are raising them well, you're doing the work of providence. It's much more important than anything I do here. Mountain Man, all you guys, all you ladies, all you women, doing the work of providence. But going back to living, you know, living is not comfort and convenience, like I said earlier. Although I'm pretty comfortable right now. You know, over the last 4 years, my life is, you know, a lot better than it was during the years of meth. But you know, sometimes I wonder if I'm growing soft. You know, I do a lot of things to ensure that, you know, to keep the complacency and comfort away. I do a lot of things. Spend a lot of time working on that. But sometimes, you know, I find myself growing restless. You know, I don't miss the drugs, but sometimes I miss that criminal element, I guess you could say. Think about it sometimes. But going back to it, you know, life, the very antithesis of life, of living, is comfort, safety, and control. We need danger. You really do. You know, I found myself in some dangerous situations during those years. I've been shot at before. Had lots of confrontations. And I miss that sometimes, because I've not had any here in the last few years. I find myself itching for it sometimes. Here lately, especially. Not because of any pent-up anger, it's just that urge to test oneself again. You know, comfort, safety, and convenience, I'm beating a dead horse here. It is the antithesis of living. You need danger. We also need suffering. You know, I suffered plenty of things during those years of meth. But I learned from it. I learned that I could do without a lot of things during that time. I mean, hell, I lived in a house without power the last year that I was there. I had a wood stove, had a creek in my front yard. I showed you all in a video a little while back of where I was raised and my house back home. I lived there without power. I didn't have a vehicle, didn't have a driver's license. If I needed to get somewhere, I walked. Most of the time, almost all the time, because it's extremely rural up there. I learned how to operate in that world. You know, and suffering, Didymus made a video. I've shielded this video before, and I'll shield it again. I'll put a link to it in the box below. Probably my favorite video of his. Entity was talking about, you know, suffering. It wasn't held as anything that was bad in any sort of traditional society. Here in this modern, consumerist, postmodernist society we live in, you know, suffering is viewed as the greatest of sins. And this is horse shit. This is bullshit. You know, suffering is something that you have to endure because it makes you stronger and it prepares you to do great things, as Didymus said. I believe this wholeheartedly. We aren't guaranteed a bed of roses in this life. And even if we were, would you take it? I wouldn't. You have to have hardship Life is struggle and strife. I hope whenever you are on your deathbed, whenever that may be, hopefully you'll be surrounded by loved ones, and hopefully, if you are talking to yourself, you will say that you can ask yourself, did I live? Did I do something worthwhile with my time here? I hope you can say yes. Anyways, this video's long enough. Like I said, this video will be a sort of primer for a very important video that I'm going to make here soon, examining some things. Also, I hope to have the Years of Lead stream uploaded here soon. Hope y'all have a great evening, great night, or if you're in Europe or Australia, South Africa, Asia, wherever. Perhaps I hope you have a good day. Thank y'all for watching. Bye-bye.